Education funding is meant for educating children, not for propping up and protecting a particular institution. We should fund students, not systems. And by the way, if you're doing a good job and you think the public education system is fine and that people will still choose it, you should have nothing to fear from a little competition. If families could take their money somewhere else, they want to do so, because if you're doing a good job, they're basically admitting their own failure by even bringing up this argument. And no one would say that allowing families to choose to shop wherever they want steals money from Walmart. No one would say that. It doesn't make any sense, because your money doesn't belong to Walmart. You can take it to Trader Joe's. And if you think about it, if you continue that logic, we already have a lot of other taxpayer-funded initiatives where the funding follows the person or the decision of the family. You think about higher education. We already have school choice vouchers for higher education in a way. They're called Pell Grants. Pell Grants, you don't have to take it to the community college. You don't have to take your Pell Grant to a state-run university. You can take a Pell Grant to a private university if you want, even a religious university. We do the same thing with pre-K programs like Head Start, which I'm not saying we should support any of these other programs. I'm just saying when we do spend money in other areas, you have a lot of the same people supporting those programs where the money follows the person, but then they don't support the money following the student only when it becomes when it comes to that K through 12 education realm. So pre-K, you can use the pre-K funding from Head Start to go to religious pre-K providers if you want. The funding follows your decision. Think about food stamps. You don't have to take your food stamps to a government grocery store. It's obviously not an assigned grocery store. It follows your choice. And I'm not arguing whether or not we should have these programs at all. Just if we're going to spend the money, we should fund people as opposed to buildings. We should fund students, not systems.
So good.
And one last technical point on this argument is that with most of these programs, and we've had about 12 states pass universal school choice in the past 3 years alone. In the past 3 years, we've had more advancement on school choice than in the preceding 3 decades, which, as an aside, by the way, is because the teachers unions overplayed their hand. They fought to keep the schools closed. People got to see what was happening in the schools through Zoom learning, which they were calling it remote learning, but we should have called it remotely learning. There wasn't a lot of learning going on. But families did get to see that there was curriculum that was not aligned with their values. They weren't focusing on the basics. And so families started to show up at the school board meeting. That democratic accountability that we heard about didn't actually work out all that well. They labeled us as domestic terrorists for pushing back against critical race theory and gender ideology. And parents said, to hell with this. And so they went and lobbied for school choice bills. And they held politicians accountable for real accountability, which is being able to vote with your feet so that the public schools don't label you as a terrorist anymore when you complain. They look at you as a customer instead and start to have to shape up and compete and do a better job. But when we pass these bills in the public schools, we spend about $20,000 per student per year nationally. It's higher in some states, lower in others. Like in Florida, it's like 27% less than the national average, which is 52% higher than average private school tuition in this country. It's a ton of money. We've increased spending in the public schools by about 164% after adjusting for inflation since 1970. Have the outcomes gotten 164% better? Obviously not. But when we pass these bills, it's typically about half of the funding follows the student. And so for the public schools, it mathematically works out to where if you're not losing all the money, but you're losing the full student on a per student basis, they end up better off. It's just like if you stop shopping at Walmart, you went to Trader Joe's, and Walmart got to keep, I don't know, half of your grocery bill funding each week. That wouldn't make any sense, but it would be a great deal for Walmart. I would argue this is a good deal for the public schools, that they get to keep any money at all for students who are no longer there. So the thing is, they want all the money. They don't just want 50%. They're greedy. They want everything, and they don't want to have to educate the kids. And in some places, they're not. In Chicago, they have about 50 schools that have 0% math proficiency. Not a single kid proficient in math. In like 50 schools, they spend about $30,000 a year. And their teachers union boss who fights against school choice called it racist last year. She sends her own kid to a private school. Total hypocrisy across the board.